This week we get to welcome back Dr. Rob Tischer. This is the second carbon footprint presentation organized by the Green Sanctuary team. 2 weeks ago, we read how the UUA Green Sanctuary 2030 work is driven by urgency to limit the effects of climate change and help us connect climate concerns with social justice. Rob also convinced us that rising greenhouse gases are largely the responsibility of the US and that we have options for reducing this impact. So thank you for giving us some of the data and information needed to help us make smart choices. And thanks for sharing more details with us, Rob.
Thanks. Okay, I think we're on our way here. I don't know how many times I've gone over this simple little presentation, and this morning I discovered I had the wrong date on. It's who knows what other silly bugs are left here. Thanks for inviting me again. I feel very strongly about what we're here all about today, and I feel good about sharing my thoughts on this. Whatever I say, make up your own mind, of course. So, carbon footprinting, why and how to do it. That's the topic I'll be discussing today. Last time I mentioned there are some good news items to think about as we're going forward here. It's not all doom and gloom. We are trying to make progress, and I think are making progress here and there. Here's some bits and pieces of good news that I shared with you last time. Here in the United States, we have a lot of incentives for reducing our carbon footprint, car incentives, home improvement incentives, agricultural incentives from the current administration. That this first time in the history of the United States, we have really strong government support for some of these carbon reducing incentives, which I think is quite cool. Use of coal is dropping rapidly. I heard yesterday that the United States has not initiated a coal-fired power plant for many years, and there are no plans to do so in the future. Matter of fact, we're phasing those out, which is good. Oh, the senator from West Virginia?
Yeah, didn't he have a lot with coal?
Oh, yeah, he's from West Virginia, yeah. Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, if you're from Wyoming, they have a lot to do with coal too. We're not out of the woods by any means, but we're not building any more coal-fired power plants. So I appreciate your comments there. Wind and solar is rising really, really rapidly in the United States, and I think across the world, especially solar. The result is CO2 emissions, as I pointed out last time, in the United States are declining somewhat. There's one other good news item that I'd like to share with you that I should have mentioned last time and I didn't. The city of La Crosse has a climate action plan that's been accepted by the city council, and we've gone through a fairly extensive planning process, establishes strategies and actions that we here in the La Crosse want to take, and there's a goal of becoming carbon neutral by 2050. I think that's really great news. I feel good to be a part of a community that's doing these sort of things, and I imagine some of you are as well. So there are bits and pieces of good news that we should always keep in mind. As I mentioned last time, reducing CO2 levels, CO2 emissions is essential. 3 graphs here that I went over before. I just will briefly review. The first one talks about CO2 emissions, how many gigatons of CO2 per year in the world going over time. Assuming that if we could somehow stop our CO2 levels and maintain them moving forward, would that be good? Would that be helpful? It sounds like it might be helpful. Actually, if you look at CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere, they would continue to increase. And if you look at the temperature on the Earth, that would continue to increase. So maintaining our current levels sounds like it might be a good idea. It's not good enough. What would work is to, we're not going to stop on a dime, but if we decreased our CO2 levels worldwide over time, That would have a positive effect on maintaining CO2 concentrations and having them level off. And that would cause our temperature. We can't stop it from rising completely, but if we take action by reducing our CO2 levels now, that will level off, plateau for the most part. So the key is doing better, not doing the same, which sounds like a good thing, but doing a lot better than we're doing. That's the central message that I think we all realize is important. The other thing I mentioned last time I think is good to reiterate. If you look at countries across the world, the United States is not the leading country that's producing CO2 now. It's China. And India their CO2 levels are rising also. However, if you look at the per capita levels of CO2 being produced, per person levels, although China is leading on a countrywide basis, if you look at the per capita level, per person level, China's level of CO2 production is about half of what we do here in the United States. So I don't think it's appropriate to throw stones here. We have an extraordinarily high level of CO2 production per person here in the United States. So we've got work to do here. I think that's the implication of what this interesting statistic shows. Okay, so last time I mentioned you undoubtedly read articles or listen to shows like on NPR about how you can reduce your carbon footprint. And there are a lot of good suggestions being offered. This comes from this piece that was just a couple of weeks ago. There were, I don't know, half a dozen, well more, probably a dozen or so actions one could take. Use air conditioning appropriately, upgrade your furnace to a heat pump, switch to electric cooking, don't bag your leaves, plant pollinator, plants for pollinators. All those are great ideas, but the question is, what really works for reducing CO2 levels? I think we have to maintain a laser-like focus on that essential question. What works the most? All these are good actions, but if you really want to prioritize reducing CO2 levels, what should we tackle first and foremost? And focus on that, as you're doing these other things too, of course. We're all interested in reducing our energy use, which will decrease CO2 production. That saves money. A lot of good things to keep in mind. Switch to LED lights when your old light bulbs wore out, or even before then if you want. Make sure your home is well insulated, et cetera, et cetera. When you buy new appliances, buy those that are Energy Star certified. But even before doing all these things, I would suggest there's one really helpful action you can take, which I'll be talking about today, and that is estimate your carbon footprint. Before you start doing all these neat things, see where you're at. The reason for doing this, to see where you're at, is this can provide a roadmap, a map that shows where you are at and then how you're moving forward. If you're planning a trip, you definitely need a map, unless, well, either you have one in your mind or you have another sort of a map that's giving you directions. It shows you where you're at and where you're going. So doing stuff willy-nilly would be like traveling, and you don't really know where you're going or how far you've gone. If you have a roadmap, you can take stock of how you're doing, where you're starting, and how you're going along on your trip. So that's, in my opinion, why doing a carbon footprint for your household is a good idea. There are a number of websites that are available. A lot of them use the same algorithm that the Cool Congregations website uses, and I think this is a pretty good one. It's a little glitchy in my opinion, but if you go to the Cool Congregations website and go over here to the calculators part of the window, drop down, there's a household calculator. There's one for congregations, but there's also one for households. And in my opinion, that's a fairly useful calculator. It's quite detailed. So let's say you've gone to that website. This is what you're confronted with. First thing you do is you type in your zip code, wait a few seconds until La Crosse, Wisconsin shows up, then move on. how many people are in your household, what's your gross annual income. So initially it's set up as the average household in La Crosse, which I'll come back to. But for your own particular household, start making these adjustments. And then as you work through the website, we'll go over these various categories. What's the carbon footprint resulting from your travel habits, some of your home and energy use characteristics, food, et cetera, et cetera. So just to show you what you'd be up against, clicking on the travel button here, there's a section right away that addresses your vehicles, cars, trucks. How many miles per year do you drive vehicle one? If you have a second vehicle, for vehicle two. So type in the mileage, your estimated mileage per year, drag the slider here to the point that corresponds to your approximate miles per gallon. The average apparently across the United States is 22 miles per gallon. I suspect that should be a little bit higher. If you don't have a second car, just click on the X and that disappears. But type in, if you do have a second car, type in the estimated mileage. Otherwise, it'll use the default value here, which probably doesn't correspond to your actual patterns. Moving on to the home category. Here's a place to type in your electricity, natural gas usage, water usage, and your house size in terms of square feet. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this because I suspect most of us have a general idea, maybe, about what our utility bills are like. If you're like me, you sort of just become numb to it, and if it's an automatic payment, it just disappears and you can't quite remember what it's all about. So if you remember a dollar amount that you spend per year or kilowatt hours per year or per month, you can make adjustments here and type in the appropriate numbers. Same for natural gas. There's a section here I'm going to be talking about payment purchase from a clean energy program. I'll come back to this. So if you can't remember your actual home usage for electricity and natural gas, what I would encourage you to do is to go onto your energy provider website. Many of you probably have Excel that provides your electricity and natural gas. If you live outside of town, it's Vernon Electric or Riverland Cooperative, something like that. Go to your website and sign up for your account. Now, I'm curious, how many here have already done that for your energy provider? I imagine a fair number of you have. If you haven't, I would encourage you to do it. It's very educational. It's easy to do. Give an email name, choose a password, sign in. And you have to have your account number, of course. And once you sign in, then you can access information like this. This is for our church. This is the kilowatt hours of electricity that we're using for 12 months. 2 years worth of data here, one for each bar shown. So you can see we sort of average around 7,500 kilowatt hours of electricity per month. So you can look at your own home use. Very, very useful in my opinion, for natural gas as well. So I would encourage you to do this. So let's say you've done that. Then there's an interesting category here about your dietary habits. Going through this, I tend to use the simple approach here. I drag my estimation of our meat usage compared to the average person in La Crosse, grains and baked goods, etc. There are various categories of food-related items here that's very interesting. If you want to be more detailed, you can click on this button and go over it with a fine-tooth comb, which is interesting. Shopping, goods and services. You can look at the average here and sort of drag the slider depending upon if you think you're average or above average or below average. Same for services. Services is kind of a hodgepodge. I'll be coming back to this. Yeah, actually, this is goods right here. If you're interested, apparently we spend a lot of money per month on furniture. This I can't really see this. We haven't bought a significant piece of furniture in decades. I don't know what it is. I buy new pants and shirts about once every 3 years, so I just, that doesn't, but you can adjust this, you can. Okay, so I've done this for a household. I've been doing carbon footprints for our house and looking at it and thinking about it for years and years. So this is our baseline energy use, food use, goods and services use for our household. My best estimate, a baseline. And so for travel, this is our carbon footprint here, 10 metric tons of CO2 per year. Our home produced 10 plus, et cetera, these various categories. So our baseline carbon footprint is 32 metric tons of CO2 per year. It's an estimate. So this is what I'm working with. This is my status quo. This is where I'm at. This is where I live, so to speak. Now I'm going to start tweaking this. And I'll be going over what we've done in our house for the past 15 years or so. So you can see what the big producers are. In our house, the biggest producer of CO2 was our electricity use. Okay, so, and right away I think, I know how to tackle that. So that was our first, our highest priority, attacking our electricity usage and the carbon footprint associated with that. So I enrolled in our energy provider's green electricity program. Vernon Electric, all the electrical co-ops here have what is called an evergreen program. You can go online and search that out and sign up for it. If Xcel Energy is your energy provider, you can go onto their website. They have something called Renewable Connect. You can sign up for green electricity from their site as well. The interesting thing for me when I looked into this, and it's still the case, the cost for doing this on an average household basis is less than $100 per year. In some cases, a fair amount less than that. It's not that expensive to get green electricity. So if you go onto Xcel Energy's website, sign into your account, it shows you how to do this. Quite straightforward, in my opinion. So here is our church's CO2 carbon footprint. Some data here. For our church, you can see electricity is our biggest source of our CO2 pollution. And what we did is we signed up for renewable energy through Xcel, and that footprint then drops down. We saved over a third of our annual carbon footprint by signing up for green electricity. 70 tons of metric tons of CO2. That's a big impact. Okay, so hopefully I've convinced you to consider signing up for green electricity. So our baseline was 3 metric tons CO2 per year. We signed up for green electricity about 15 years ago. And this part of the graph got a lot shorter. We eliminated our carbon footprint associated with electricity. Our CO2 footprint dropped down to 26 metric tons. Okay, so looking at this, what should we focus on next? Well, natural gas in our case. What we did was, this is about 15 years ago, we retrofitted our house to geothermal heating and cooling using a heat pump. The truck came in, parked right next to our garage, drilled a hole down several hundred feet, put a tube in that circulates fluid down to the earth and up into our house. This is our basement. These two tubes, it's a closed loop system, came up right through our basement floor. They drilled under our garage, under the footings, and popped it up right in our basement, right exactly where they wanted to. And this fluid circulates into the house, into our heat pump here, back into the earth, and goes like that. So in the wintertime, it brings heat into the house. In the summertime, it cools the house by using the earth's temperature to cool the house. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this, it cost a fair amount of money, although we got good rebates. The next owner, I wanted them to have this. I I'm taking the step here, but it's going to be inherited by somebody who buys our house after we leave. These days, heat pump options are appropriate. They weren't available when we did this. I would look into that now, and I know some of you are up to snuff on doing this sort of thing and can testify about the new heat pump options that are available. The bottom line is this footprint associated with natural gas dropped down to this small bar here. We do have a natural gas backup when it gets really cold, so we didn't completely eliminate it, but our footprint dropped down to 23 metric tons. Okay, next item on my agenda, this sucker, car fuel. We were driving hybrid cars, one hybrid car and another car that got pretty good gas mileage, but still our carbon footprint was fairly high. It's not good enough. 2 years ago, we had the opportunity to consider buying an electric vehicle. Good rebate, it wasn't extremely expensive, so we did that. And we still have one gas car, but our carbon footprint went down a lot. And this is where we're at today, more or less, 18 metric tons of CO2 per year for our house. So, coming back, this sucker here is, I'm scratching my head on that. That's the service, carbon footprint associated with services. And services include stuff like this: healthcare, personal business and finance, vehicle service. I don't know how to approach that. I don't want to give up healthcare. I got a feeling that if you really tackle this, you're still going to come up with this. In our country here, if you want to have healthcare services, there's a big carbon footprint associated with that. Maybe we just have to live with that and cut down in other parts of our lives. Not sure. Okay, average household in La Crosse, this is what their footprint looks like. Biggest footprint is associated with fuel for cars, electricity, natural gas, meat, furniture and clothing. Your carbon footprint would probably be different from this, but maybe not that much different. So if you add all those up, this is what the average household carbon footprint is derived from: car fuel. If you have an energy efficient car, let's say you get better than 22 miles per gallon, which I bet most of you do, that would drop down to perhaps 4 or 5 or 6, which would be good, but still up there. Electricity, natural gas, plus these other things. So these are the things, if you want to intelligently attack your carbon footprint, these would be the things to look at. Okay, I'm finished. It's up to you guys. Should I or should I not take action? I think most of us would probably be inclined to take action on things that save us money. But what about actions that might not save money but don't cost that much? Or what about actions that do cost a fair amount of money but you really feel motivated to do it, like buying a new heat pump? Or maybe something you want to think about in the future. You know your heating system is old, but you can't replace it this year, but maybe 5 years down the road you want to. Okay, so I'll stop there. And it's your turn to ask questions and carry on a discussion and that sort of thing.